Welcome back to another episode of The Hit. My name is James Layton, CEO and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where every single week I bring you a leader from our sector to discuss some of the biggest challenges in UK housing today. I was delighted today to be joined by Louise Swain, Chief Executive of Alliance Homes. We talked to Louise around how the organisation has transitioned from a traditional one to a cutting-edge business over the last 6 years, how they've created a customer obsession, embedded that into their culture of the organisation, and how important and challenging it is to keep up with the demand of affordable homes in the Southwest, and how her role as chair of the Southwest should help shape that. I hope you like the episode, and if you do, I'd ask that you like and subscribe. Louise, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, welcome. Hi, nice to see you, James.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. As we always like to start, an introduction to yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Louise Swain. I'm the CEO at Alliance Homes Group. We're based in sort of North Somerset. Your listeners might recognise Weston-super-Mare as a sort of place there. So we're a sort of stock transfer organisation from the council. So our heartlands is North Somerset, but we now cover sort of the whole of what we call the west of England, Bristol, Bath, South Gloucestershire, but mostly within the North Somerset. So we're just on the edge of Bristol, which you might well tell from my accent.
Yeah, I love it. And I think we spoke off camera, obviously, and you said that you grew up in social housing, but is that where the passion for the sector came from? Most people fall into the sector by accident, but is that sort of where your passion and drive for making a difference came from, would you say?
Well, I didn't grow up in social housing thinking I want to work in social housing.
Yeah,
no. But I think contextually, I sort of did fall into social housing, but I think when I was growing up, I was always very sort of socially aware, and I knew that I wanted to do something that was probably going to be like social purpose.
Yeah.
And when I sort of started working in housing, I really felt I had a lot to give because of my experience of living in social housing, which was largely positive.
Yeah.
You know, my parents benefited from large-scale council housing programme. You know, they moved into a house on the edge of Bristol. I think there were about 3,000 homes built. They had one child at the time. They got a 3-bedroom brand new house.
Yeah.
And I came along later. And so my memories of growing up in social housing are really, really positive. A great home, a really good community in which I grew up in, lots of family, lots of friends. So I've been very passionate since working in housing about trying to sell the benefits of that, because I think it's a bit sad that we've moved away from kind of seeing the benefit of that type of housing at scale that I grew up in.
Yeah.
But actually, one of the challenges about growing up in that environment was that we didn't have a very good education. We had a pretty poor comp on the edge of the estate. I wasn't didn't get subjected to lots of pushing academically. So I left school with very few qualifications and mainly just stuff I was mostly interested in, otherwise I really didn't bother. And then I got the opportunity to join as an apprentice on the sort of what was the YTS scheme.
Right.
If you can remember that, years ago. And that really elevated that really gave my passion for work and learning. I went on through different parts of my career to get a degree and do lots of qualifications. And then through working in local government from that, I then sort of took an active choice into working for housing associations about 20 years ago. So I was kind of involved in housing around the periphery, but I really enjoyed it. And when I got the opportunity to go for a job in a housing association, I took it. And since then, I've worked in sort of traditional housing associations, but more into my career, this part of my career, I've worked largely in stock transfer organisations.
Yeah,
so I think that's it. And I think, one of the things is that having been brought up in social housing gives me a good understanding of the types of issues that customers face, although it's been quite a long time since I have been living in social housing myself now. So I still have to kind of revisit back to make sure that, there's an understanding of today's issues. But I think it does give me a good kind of empathy and kind of first-hand experience of what it's like to live in housing. But, predominantly my feelings on that are positive.
Yeah, good. And I think, as you said, worked in senior positions for 20 years. What have you seen fundamentally? I mean, even maybe from childhood, but what have you seen as some of the major fundamental changes in the sector in that period?
I think the housing sector has changed. I think when I first started working in housing, yes, there was a real sort of demand for affordable housing, but it felt it was alongside a quite functioning private rented sector, a quite functioning home ownership sector. So I think as we've seen home ownership become more difficult to get, we've seen the private rented sector being really expensive and insecure. I think the call on housing associations to deliver more in the housing sector has become greater. So I think that's led to the sector becoming acutely focused on growth and about how we can play our part. You know, we're running much more complex businesses than maybe 20 years ago. And I think, you know, there's been a lot said about the grassroots, but yeah, you know, my experience working even at senior level, it was the governance of the organisation and leadership still felt very grassroots. And I think that changed to being, you know, much more around corporate leadership and, you know, using our balance sheets to sweat our assets to build more homes. So we've become much more professionalised in that sense and more focused on that. And of course, that then leaves that open debate about that balance between the challenge of growth versus how to invest in homes. So that's how I think I've seen it. So at the moment, it feels like the demand for affordable housing is greater than I've ever experienced it. Yeah. We've got people coming to us, they're sort of wanting our services that ordinarily might have been okay in the private sector. So I think that just, you know, it means that we are every day we're feeling that sort of stress. I turned on the television this morning, like most people, the radio, and we're hearing, you know, 1 in 50 people are homeless in London. You know, these are, you know, staggering figures, and, you know, I think reflect that the pressure the sector's under.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Manchester, and it's evident now that it's getting worse. And so, and I think that we're not through the most of the pain without making it a spiral of doom. We're not through the worst. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And certainly that balance between creating new homes, and I want to ask you about that later on, so we will talk about that. But there is a real difficulty to balance the two now, I think, more than ever.
I mean, I think one of the positive, you know, one of the big things I have seen change, which is a much more blend of people from career sector people and people from the private sector. And I think that change has been really good. I think in terms of trying to run a business, you know, we've certainly got people that have come from, you know, particularly on what I call the back office, you know, the technical side, the IT technology side, that have got loads of experience of working in customer-led businesses that they can bring that in. So whereas I think 20 years ago, it felt like most of the people working in the sector were career sector people.
Yeah, I agree. And I talk about this often around, I think we can offer lots of variety of careers now, whereas previously my mum worked in housing all her life and it was seen as public sector, and it was, you know, you go there, you work there forever. Now you see people coming from really customer-centric organisations joining and wanting to join our sector because they want to transform our digital offering or our, I don't know, sustainability offering. I'm seeing that all the time at the moment.
Yeah, I think we've got a very strong calls to social purpose, which a lot of people really enjoy. You know, when I speak to people that have had a lot of career time in other sectors, that's what draws them to working in housing. It's not the money.
Yeah, of course.
It's the fact that they're getting up every day and using their skills to make a contribution to social good. And, you know, I think sometimes we think that the people that are on the front line that care about customers, but actually all through our business, at every touch point, you find people that are really passionate about what we do.
Yeah, no, I agree. And as we look at Alliance Homes, then just give us a bit of an overview of the business and kind of the helicopter view of what it is, what it does, and because I know it's more complicated, and as you said, actually, a more complex business now.
Yeah, so at Alliance, we've got about just touching on 7,000 homes. We've actually simplified our business quite a lot, because one of the things when I arrived at Alliance, it was very much a business that was trying to do lots of different things. And the one thing it didn't do was build new homes. Right. So that was really interesting to me, because that's our sort of differentiator, if you like. So we took a lot of time to review our strategy, and we've moved towards being you know, a great landlord and delivering as many affordable homes as we can. And we've reviewed what else we do. So, for example, we did do domiciliary care. We don't now. We've transferred that to another specialist provider. You know, we care deeply about care. We still do, but we decided that actually somebody else was better to lead that.
Of course.
So focus on doing what we want, because we want to be able to sort of compete and excel in the things that we do. And so, our engine is only so big, and we want to make sure that we're focusing on those core things. So we're very much back to the core of what we do. We do quite a lot of wraparound support. We're very, very lucky in that we work with North Somerset Council, who still do give us grant to do support. They really do see the benefit of money spent today saves a lot of money later on down the line. So we're still doing a lot of support to customers within our organisation and outside in the locality. And we do lots of, community growth, all the stuff that links back to landlord, we're still very much doing, but we have contracted what we do to try to focus on that agenda of being a landlord and growing homes. The last 5 or 6 years since I joined, we've done a huge amount of transformational change in terms of, moving from what I would say being a sort of fixed mindset business to one of a growth mindset. And now I would say where we are is we're at the hard graft end of really making that customer change that we want to do, which is very easy to write in a plan, much more difficult to try and change all of that. I always liken it to try and change the engine of a plane when it's flying. How do you make all these changes to what you want to do alongside having that pressure of the day-to-day service delivery? So that's where we're at the moment, trying to find our way through. We're quite excited about sort of really over the last sort of few years, we've been really looking at our model of delivery. Most of the models in housing delivery are very reactive. So we react when the customer says there's a problem. Yeah. So we're trying to sort of change to be much more proactive, which is engaging with customers, moving to things like an MOT model, getting out, talking to customers, actively supporting them in managing their homes, rather than sitting back and waiting for them to tell us there's a problem. That sounds really easy when you say it. Actually, that's the sort of passion that we have for where we want to go to next, and we're sort of just really starting to think about how we can do that wholesale.
Yeah, and what's what's behind that vision of trying to be a bit more cutting edge instead of the traditional norm? Like what's driving that, would you say?
Well, customer insight, one of the things that we've done, we've invested heavily in early days customer segmentation, really understanding who our customers were. And this was part of our cultural transformation, actually, because I don't know if other people have said this to you, but working in a traditional housing association and working in a stock transfer are very different. Right. Because their histories are different. Stock transfer organisations often have cultures that are essentially quite like the local authority culture. Right. And I'm not knocking local authority culture, by the way. But it tends to be quite a risk averse, kind of quite a paternal relationship with customer, and one where it's, I think bureaucracy first, action second. So we've done a lot of work here on our sort of mindset of change to do that. And part of that was around this sense of talking about our customers like they're one homogenous group of people, and they're not. So the segmentation really helped us to unpack who are our current customers and what are their needs and wants. What do we need to do to best serve them? Yeah. That's been really interesting. In a nutshell, about 50% of our customers are doing pretty okay. They are living pretty self-sustaining lives. They can, manage for themselves, interact with us, tell us what they need when they want. About 30% are needing, and maybe 25% are doing okay, but they need our support, mostly around, money advice, financial support. A lot of our customers are what we call the just about managing, struggling to do that. And then we've got about 20% of our customers that are quite disenfranchised and need and want quite a lot from us. Okay. And that includes the things that they want to help make their house a home. So we've been increasingly finding that our customers are saying, we want carpets, we want curtains, we want this, we want you to help us with all sorts of things. And so we've really had to take a step back and go, right, what does our service offering look like in the future? And how can we make sure that we serve all these different segments of customers in the best way? And some of that is about leaving the customers that are okay alone, right? So of course. Get on with their lives, I always say, why does your landlord keep needing to be in touch with you if there's not a problem? So our thinking is around, well, a lot of our efforts go into what I call service failure. We spend a lot of time, ergo a lot of money, in actually dealing with problems. So if we can try and be more proactive in engaging with people, getting out, doing annual visits, talking to them, how's your home, finding out, fixing stuff on the spot, then we start to see, I think, a much smarter way of working. And also we have a conversation with the customer, because a lot of the time, the way that we do services, there's never any touch point which the customer can actually be heard. Not in a kind of, how is it? How was it like living here? What do you know? What are you experiencing, etc. So that's the vision, and that's what we're trying to do. But it is, it's turning around a big tanker. But we're very passionate, and we're starting to do a pilot probably later part of this year on doing annual MOT checks on repairs. Yeah,
amazing. And I have a few questions there. One's about transformational change, because clearly it's the hardest thing in the world to do, the easiest thing to write down, as you've said. How have you got your team behind that? As a leader and as a chief exec of an organisation, how have you got the behavioural change in with your team and aligning everyone's values to the direction of travel, would you say?
I mean, I'm a big fan of I'm not a big fan of theoretical models, but I like everything to be simple. So I really, Daniel Pink, I think it is, talks about motivation, and he says there are 3 key things that people really need to have to feel motivated. And one is a clear sense of purpose. Yeah. The other is autonomy to act, responsibly and adult. And the other is to allow their mastery or their skill set to be developed. So that really resonated with me, because I thought, actually, that sounds quite powerful. So we sort of use those as hooks. And the first thing is to make sure that we've got a really clear strategy. So we've done a lot of work in co-creating with colleagues and customers, actually, what is it that we should be doing and what do we want to do? So when I first joined Alliance, we reset the strategy. We called it Plan A. And then last year we've refreshed it, and it's Plan A 2.0 now, right? Because we're still on the same journey, we're just refining. Yeah. And we've got a plan on a page. And so we've really tried to, from recruiting exec level all the way through the business, we really try and recruit for attitude to what we're looking for in terms of our plan and our values. And also we really try and make sure that the messaging through the business is linked back to that plan, so that every single person understands how they fit into what they do, the difference it makes to the goals we're trying to achieve, and then back to our purpose, which we've refined as we've gone. Yeah. So I think that creates the sort of a North Star, if you like, that everybody can understand, and people then can make their own decisions. And they do make, and throughout this transformation we've been on, people have opted to leave. It's not the kind of organisation they want to be in, but other people have opted to join us and want and feel passionate about that. And I would say to people, like, I think it's really important to work somewhere where you love what you do and you love what they do, right? So absolutely, that's how we've done that. And culture change takes 10, 15, it takes a long time. This stuff is not overnight. I've learned that the hard way. We started on our journey for being a great place to work about 4 years ago, and it's taken us to this year to get the accreditation. And that's great, because we've been getting the learning, but I'd be lying to say if it wasn't frustrating that, you want that change to go quicker, and you want people to see how great things are. But, it has to be considered, and it has to be consistent for people to feel like, yeah, actually, I really do buy into this.
Yeah, no, that's really useful. And I was going to discuss culture. I mean, how have you made that? Well, I suppose firstly, how have you made Alliance a great place to work? Because I know you got the accreditation, but I mean, how important has been the values and behaviours that underpin that in terms of making sure that everyone's aligned to that central vision? Because like you said, it doesn't mean that the people that have left you are bad people, but you've got to be aligned, haven't you? As people in organisation, they have to be aligned to make it work.
Yeah, I think you can never get 100% of alignment, but yeah, you want the lion's share of your colleagues to feel like that. Yeah, you're in the same boat, as it were. But I think it starts with the plan, and then we've done a huge amount. We've invested a lot in our sort of learning and development functions, and I've got a people director who is coming from out the sector, who's really supported to kind of bring all of that to life. But actually, it's just about listening. When we first, the reason that we started to do the Great Places to Work was not necessarily because we wanted the badge, right? Although, take the badge. It was really about what is the methodology that we're going to use to consistently measure ourselves against what we want to be. And so Great Places to Work really resonated with us because it's based around trust. It's a trust index. And we want at the heart of our culture to be a trusting organisation. We want our customers to trust us and we want our colleagues. So the questions within that are asked are going to lead back to actually trust. It's also really hard. It's a really high bar to achieve, right? So when we started on the journey, and the other thing as well, there are always subcultures in organisations. So it's really like listening to what people tell you, and at times that's tough because you have to hear things you don't necessarily like to hear, right? But you need to know, and then demonstrating that you're listening and demonstrating that you're putting into action the things that people are saying are really important. Or when you ask a question and there's a gap between what you think and what everyone else is thinking, trying to understand why does that gap exist. You don't just do it once a year. This is graph day in, day out, right? This is stuff all the way through. We get our Great Places to Work and we take it down to team level, and all the managers in the business are, enthused with understanding from their teams how they can improve their scores. We know from tons of research that's ever been done that people leave businesses because of their manager. So investing in that management structure and getting your managers aligned to culture and values is absolutely critical, because when people are filling in those forms, they're not thinking about me as the chief exec, they're thinking about what is their day-to-day experience of working here, and that largely is the manager, isn't it?
Yeah. And what are some of the kind of like headline pillars that they look at, or what were some of the headline pillars that they assessed you around? Because I appreciate there'll be employee satisfaction, well-being, there'll be all sorts of things, but what's some of the key things that you did take action on and did change to make you accredited or get the badge, let's call it?
Yeah, so they look at things like pay and rewards, they're looking at well-being and support, they're looking at learning development, career opportunities, they're looking at behaviours of leaders, they're looking at accountability of board and executive, all of those types of things. And we did really well on the work-life balance stuff, because we've always invested a lot in Agile, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and allowing people to have freedom and flexibility within a framework to operate. But the areas that we needed to improve on was really about people feeling like they were listened to, managers taking action on what people are saying, being able to trust executives, being able to trust the board. Those were things that we weren't doing really poorly on, but we really wanted to make improvements on. Visibility of leadership is really important. People need to, in a business our size at least, you would expect people to know who I was. We need to be out and about with understanding. I think one of the things in leadership is really important is, and this is what goes back to your first question about change in the sector, I think it becomes increasingly challenging to spend time out from behind the desk, because it's very easy to leave for your whole week to be, corporate governance. Right?
Of course. So
you have to make the time to get out and about. And I like to do that because, not because I want to solve the problems, right, but because I think it really helps you to sort of triangulate, what you're seeing in the boardroom, what you're seeing in exec meetings versus what you're seeing on the ground, and then to really understand what it is you need to do to make the difference.
Absolutely, yeah. And we might as well talk about it now, because it's a really important segue, is how have you found, because this is always something I'm interested in, how have you found the Agile working piece? Was it led from the pandemic, or were you already there? And also, how has that been around leadership for you personally, but also for your teams to be able to, do the check-ins on well-being, make sure people are getting the support that they need? Because Agile working is difficult. No one's really got the exact recipe yet, I don't think, but people are getting close now, I think, to be able to empower employees, but also make sure they get the level of support and training and development that they need as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were, before the pandemic, part of our culture shift was we were already going Agile. So we were quite lucky, because when it hit, everyone had their own laptop, and we were already, our offices had been referred to, reflect what we saw a trend in, future work pattern, in that people want their jobs and their lifestyles to be more integrated, you know. So everyone's got a lot of demands on them as people. You know, work is the thing that we do, not necessarily a place that we go, was the little mantra that we use. But the pandemic probably took us about 20 years forward in terms of actually the way that we do that, right? Because everybody was working, it accelerated that journey for us. Most of that was positive, but it also meant that we've had to retrofit back in some things because, you know, Alliance is a people-led business and most people like working here because of our social purpose and the connectivity back. So we thought long and hard and thought, well, if we just allow it to be a remote business, an unintended consequence of that might be in 2, 3, 4 years' time that we wake up and nobody is connected anymore. And I've been hearing this from other people had gone fully remote, that's how they were starting to feel, not in the sector, but my friends outside the sector.
Agreed, yeah.
So we've, but at the same time, we didn't want to constrain because we really, myself included, we really loved the idea that people could self-lead and manage and do the right thing on the right, you know, day, whatever suited the business needs. So what we've done is we've put in a sort of loose framework for managers where, you know, where we expect people to come together in, you know, team meetings at least once every so often, or once every couple of months at least, one-to-ones to be in faith. So we've put in touch points where we expect there to be you in person and to make sure that connectivity to the business.
Yeah, it's important.
I do road shows once a quarter that is all about how we're doing against the plan. We've moved those there face to face. It's a chance for people to come in.
That's good.
Etc. So we've done that, and that's going well. But I'd be lying to say there's not some pushback because some people do want to be fully remote.
Right.
And we have had some of our niche skill sets. We've been recruiting people from further and further away, right? So we haven't found our way through that yet, but that's where we're trying to grapple with that. Okay, we want to make sure that we can recruit the best talent, but we don't want to, you know, we don't want to lose that connectivity. So I suspect we'll end up being a sort of hybrid, where we might expect that some jobs are fully home working, but largely speaking, most of the people are still sort of office, you know, when you need to come to where you go.
I was going to ask you that question actually, because, you know, you don't speak to many leaders in the West because, you know, the need for housing is there, but clearly like you don't speak to as many. But I was going to ask you if you have any localized challenges from a talent perspective and if your agile working had helped you to, you know, get hold of those niche skill sets. But second to that, I was going to ask whether or not some of the specialist roles you need were difficult to recruit because they can be in more remote locations of the country.
Yeah, I think yes to both really. I think I don't know if they're local to the West Country because I think recruitment challenges are everywhere. I mean, we're on the edge of Bristol, which is a big city, so we very easily put in the talent there. And I know the further down the southwest you go, I mean, certainly the conversations about house building, it becomes, you know, more and more challenging as you have less and less to pull on. So yeah, we do. Trades is obviously an area that is an issue, and we're competing in a pretty small pool. We're not at a crisis point with that, we're managing, but we're having to work much harder to recruit people, and the flexible offer and the benefits that the kind of organisation we are is attractive to quite a lot of trade people. So that's how we try and hook them in and retain them, you know.
Of course.
So that works quite well for us. Specialist roles, particularly around ICT area, yeah, we've definitely gone outside of the area. I mean, my FD actually lives in London, so you know, even within the exec team, we've gone outside of area. But we always recruit. You know, when we recruit people, we say what our expectation is, and they say whether yes or no. So,
of course,
I recruit my FD, for example. I said, look, the expectation is you'll come in as required. Right, and it's not a problem. That's what happens. So you don't like to be too prescriptive, like you have to come in once a week or once a quarter as required. But yeah, we are widening ourselves up to that, and I think that's the future. I agree, and I don't think it can be a one size fits all. But I also believe that the sector's grappling with this at the moment. Some went fully remote, some went back to the office too soon, you know, and the nuances within that have meant that
people are now struggling of what they've told people and what they set out. And that's why I think it needs to be flexible sometimes, because certainly in some of the harder to find skills, ICT was one that I was thinking of when I mentioned it. They're used to working remotely in the private sector or in other public sector organisations. So you've got to be attuned to that, I think.
One of the things we try to do is to make that difference is okay, right? So this obsession that everybody has to operate the same, because actually if you're working in the contact centre or you're a tradesman, there's quite static in what you can actually do, because you've got to be answering the phone or you've got to be out in the van doing repairs. In lots of other jobs, there's much greater ability to flex as you go. But what we're trying to do with those more fixed areas like the trades and contact is to allow them flexibility as well, but within work patterns and the way that they operate. But you can't have the same flexibility as, say, me to Tesco's for an hour. You know what I mean? It's they're different jobs.
It doesn't work, does it? And look, and it's customer led as well, surely, right? So if you're in a customer led role,
exactly that, and that we follow. I mean, that's what and when we go back to customer session, that's my mantra. We follow what the customer requires, right? And if we follow the customer, we can't go far wrong. If we start to follow what we want or what we require, then we can lose our way, or you can find out, that a customer's trying to ring and no one's answering the phone.
100. Yeah, it's all these challenges, isn't there? And I was going to go on to customer, but you talked about customer obsession. What does that mean to you, and sort of how's that been embedded in the culture as well?
Yeah, this is quite an emotive area, really, because I think you have to be quite careful here, because when you work in a housing organisation, people feel very passionately about customers, but actually not necessarily, the whole organisation is not necessarily customer-centric. So there's a care and a passion about doing well for customers, but every decision-making point in the business is not for the customer. So that's what we've been trying to do, which is saying, actually, everything we do in our business is about the customer. And you have to explain that quite well to people, or else they think you're saying they don't care about the customer, which is not what you're saying. But what you're saying is that actually we try to make sure that what we do is really, really making sure it's done with the customer in mind. So, the times that we open, the processes that we operate, all of those things are for ease of customer, not ease of colleague. And that is quite a big shift and takes quite a lot of time, and requires a lot of infrastructure change. I mean, like 2 years ago now, we made quite a big investment. I brought in a new executive director of digital. He's come from the airline industry, and he's brought a whole set of skills and experience, which has been fantastic, because he's very customer centric, because he's worked in very customer led, but he's also helping us to utilize ICT in a much better way. To get to automation and to make this stuff easier for colleagues, because if it's really difficult for colleagues, then it becomes really difficult to stop. So we need to make sure our processes are as easy as possible so that colleagues can serve customers in the way we want to.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that, actually. Does the segmentation of data help you with that, in the sense that I presume, I'm thinking myself here, but like I want everything digitally now, but that's not the case for my mum. She would want to be able to ring somebody and there's someone at the end of the phone to speak to her. So have you found that's been quite an interesting journey around the digital stuff, bringing an executive director of digital in around different needs for different customers, I presume?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're quite obsessed with utilising digital to automate, to make sure that our business can be as smart as possible. And we want to offer our customers as much self-service as possible, but we're not a business at the moment that is wanting to close down other options for customers. So we're still very much in the space of serving customers as they want to be served. And some customers want to self-serve, but I think one of the challenges with self-service, it's very easy to say, our customers can self-serve, tick, but do you really understand the experience that the customer is, is it really working in the way that you work? So we're spending quite a bit more time than I would like, but I think good time, to make sure that the offering that we give is really good and slick, rather than it just being an offering. And so we've been sort of looking at our ICT strategy, sort of from the bottom up to where we want to get to, and making sure that it all works as we want to. We had, like most housing associations, when I joined Alliance, I think it had something like 20 odd legacy systems, spreadsheets, you know, it's just and the control environment that was people did what they wanted, right? So,
of course.
It's been a big journey that we're on, and my new director has really helped to bring, I guess, a skill set that we didn't have before. What's possible. So, but yes, we're still quite early on that journey.
I think there's been some cool stuff done in the sector, actually. I interviewed someone from a housing association in the Northeast, and they had some kind of pop-ups that they'd put around their area just to help customers understand the technology, because some customers wanted to use it, just couldn't. So I think there's an educational piece for some as well, because and that was really cool. Like they were thinking of taking it to the customer and saying, look, this is how easy it could be, but there is an educational step there, I think.
Yeah, and you've got to make sure that your service offering that sits behind it is going to deliver. So, you know, if you've got a customer self-serving a repair and they're booking their own repair, you've got to make sure that your systems are, you know, you better turn up and you better fix it, right?
Yeah, of course.
The factory. So, you know, it's not as simple as just putting in the technology to allow it to self-serve. You have to make sure that all of your systems that sit behind that are delivering to the expectation of what you'll say you're going to offer customers. So, you know, it's definitely the future. I mean, I think it's one area to be excited about what technology can offer us in the future.
Yeah, I agree.
We can use it to free ourselves up from lots of stuff that, quite frankly, the computers, you know, IT can take care of, and we can spend our time talking to customers, or, you know, doing the customers in the way, you know, engaging with them in a way that we sometimes just don't get enough time to do.
No, I agree. And I was going to ask you this previously, but I think a good thing for me right now is how do we, I sometimes believe that the sector at the moment gets confused or loses sight of core focuses. And I think one thing I was going to ask is how do we balance customer satisfaction, but then also delivering new homes to a fantastic standard? Like, how can we get all of those things right in this? And how do we address to make sure we are aligned to core focuses in our businesses?
Yeah, and I think the sector is at a really interesting point now. And I think when we talked earlier about what's changed, it's remiss of me not to mention about the sort of rollback of the public sector services as well, which has had a massive impact. Because, when I was a housing officer 20 years ago, if I went and seen a customer, I could, quite easily get a health visitor, all these different people to support. And now it's much more difficult. Mental health issues is much more difficult, and as a landlord, we're often the one that can't walk away or not be there, because essentially people are in our homes. So I think that we've been trying to be everything to everybody to fill that gap, which is great, because we've got so much heart and that's what we want to do. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, trying to make sure that we are, using our assets to build as many homes as possible. And all alongside this, you've got a limited amount of rent envelope, because our rents are, kept at a level that, alert and capped, which is good because it means the customer gets, a good deal. But I think all of the stuff at the moment in the sector with our case and everything else is really, really, and also net carbon as well, is bringing to the fore the need to invest in homes more. And I don't buy into this rhetoric that the sector has lost its soul or it's lost its way. I think people have been doing it with really good intention, but the unintended consequence is we've been trying to stretch that plan too far. And I think we're going to see a sector much more investing in existing homes. And this is the thing I say about customer obsession. Customers are obsessed with their product, and our product is their home. So this very idea, if you give a customer a home substandard and you be very nice to them and you do all this other stuff, it's just not going to work. So we really need to understand our first offering to a customer is a product for home. So we're spending huge amounts more money now on things like empty home standards to make sure that every home we let, we're proud of. And then we're doing a lot more to say, how can we keep those assets in really good order, which is one of the reasons why we want to do an annual visit, so that we can check on that and make sure that the customer is managing it, etc. So yeah, I think that there's going to be a look back. I think we've also got a problem with aging stock, and what are we going to do to keep up with the need to refresh that and regenerate. Really good news that we can access funding, but there hasn't been a lot of that going on for a long time. So there's a huge amount of backlog probably that needs to be looked at, and those homes are probably the homes that are bringing the biggest call onto our repairs budgets at the moment, because people need a lot doing to them. So I don't have an answer, but I think that there is going to be a greater desire around the board table to say, look, I know with my board, it's like the exam question that one's answering is, how much do we need to spend to keep our homes to a standard that we're proud of? And once we answer that question, we then understand what, boil it down to simple terms, how many pounds in rent money can we spend on interest payments to service loans to build new homes? I mean, that's at its basic level. That's where that calculation needs to be.
It is, and it's never been more difficult to be a chief executive at the moment, because it genuinely is a difficult time for the sector, and I think we'll look back at this moment and hopefully we've made some good decisions. I really like the funding for regeneration. I think that's going to be massive for the sector, and hopefully more funding will come for, I know there's the decarb fund and there's other stuff coming through. We're getting there slowly, and I feel like we're making some progress. But there's got to be funding available, because you can't just be expected to build new homes through your own balance sheet. I mean, it's not going to work, is it? Or having to get loans and funding, and I can't see how it balances long term.
No, and I think, the word that I would apply to the sector is pragmatism. I think we've tried to be really pragmatic as we can, in working within the constraints of a broken housing system. And we need a long-term cross-party strategy to housing. The NatFed have just published something on this, and I think it's really worth a read around, we do, because actually if we're going to solve the housing crisis, it's going to take a long and sustained joined up approach to do it. And that's what we need. Without that, we've been dealing with sort of piecemeal stuff that's come along, and we've been trying to make the best of it and trying to serve everybody, the needs of people that need homes and the needs of the people in homes. And, we're doing there's some, I'm not saying the job that we're doing with that is terrible, but we know that we have got homes that are not in a standard that we necessarily would be proud of, and they are going to need investment, and possibly a lot of that is going to be investment that makes it not viable to spend. And we need to think about regeneration. At Alliance, we're quite, I say, lucky. We're compared to other housing associations, I think our job there is less. We've got only just under about 80% of our homes are at EPC level. Whilst I'll talk about all the changes I've made since I've been here and the need to transform, one of the solid things that the organisation did for years before I got there was to spend and prioritise on major works, and so that has stood us in very good stead. But we've still got a lot to do getting our homes beyond decent standards. And the other thing I would say is that people, reminisce back to the old days. Well, I've been working in housing for a long time, and before the decent home standard was introduced, a lot of the homes were not in good order, right? I remember being a housing officer and going around stuff that is not good. So this very idea that it's all gone to rack and ruin, it's like, no, actually we've made good progress with decent homes. We just need to keep going and continue with that progress.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you said it before, and I think this summarises the sector at the moment. Pragmatic, great. But I also think we're creating this real reactive world that we live in, because we do this spotlight management of single things. So, building safety, that's an ongoing, but still a thing that we put a massive spotlight on. Then it's decarb, then it's new build. We need a proactive plan and a long-term funding model that's going to work so that we can invest for the future, rather than, right, let's fix this year and this next year and this the year after. It's got to be more proactive. It's surely got to be more proactive longer term.
I agree with that totally, and I think one of my little mantras is hold your nose, because when you're trying to change things fundamentally it takes time, and we all want to see results quickly, and sometimes, and in that change, things can get worse before they get better, and people kind of run, and you just don't react. We need to stay in this vision space of actually we believe this is going to take our customers to a much better service in the longer term. When it comes back to the envelope of money we're going to spend on existing homes, a big slug of that has got to be looking at how smart we operate, and how much money we don't waste on dealing with constant failure, which our systems create.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is perennial frustration.
Yeah, absolutely.
I spend time sitting with the contact team. You spend time sitting with the contact team and you listen. And I sit there and I think, and I always go, how much of this was avoidable contact, right? And a lot of it is avoidable contact.
Yeah, and that's no good for either the customer or the contact centre, right? So no one wants that contact.
Yeah.
And for you personally, as we just look at the present, and I want to just ask you some things about the future, kind of share of homes for the Southwest now. Talk us about some of the good work that's aimed at, and certainly some of the things that they're doing to tackle some of the housing challenges, I presume, for the region, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's for the Southwest. I mean, it was originally set up, I think, when I joined Alliance, I joined the group. I think it was about 8 years ago that it was set up. And it was predominantly that we didn't have a single voice in the Southwest.
Okay.
And we wanted to create a stronger voice about lobbying for the uniqueness of the Southwest.
Right.
So that's what its purpose was. And we've got our own manifesto, and we have very much been successful in cross-party lobbying of local MPs to understand the crisis, to understand how we can support and help. And originally the ask was very much around helping us and enabling us, because we've got huge amounts of money to spend, right? And we want to be able to spend it wisely to develop more affordable housing. And actually, if we can lever in more grant, we can build even more. And actually, the grant environment has changed very positively in the last few years. There's much more grant going in now. But then that said, land and build costs have gone up. So, challenge. So that's what we've been doing, and we've got a PR company that we work with that help us with that, all of that sort of lobbying work. So we've been, I think, very much in and around the table, having the right conversations. Regen being one, infrastructure levy. We've been doing a lot of commentary on that. So we tend to be an active voice in commenting on policy and the positive bits of it and the things that it may well constrain. And I think we're just refreshing now. As I've stepped in this chair, it's time we're going to just refresh our manifesto. We had a good conversation week before last about this, and I think our desire, our ask going forward is going to be slightly different, because we're likely to see political change. Yep. So we're very much about trying to get that dialogue with Labour and the Lib Dems, and looking at how helping them, supporting them to think about what does housing policy look like. Because every single person that we speak to is of the same opinion that we need to build more affordable homes. And that's cross-party, actually. We've never had any issues with engaging cross-party, but then how does it translate into action becomes the challenge. So I think local demand-led planning is our call for the future, really. We really need to make sure that we've got local level targets that reflect the demands in the nuances of the area, and then we've got more dynamic planning to get those homes built. And what I would say, because last year we got the University of West of England to do a study looking at the nuances of the housing market, which is great. It's really rich data, actually. Yeah. But actually, even in our sub-region of the Southwest, there's so many, when you go down to Devon and Cornwall, the second homes market, Airbnb market, it's actually staggering, some of the statistics about the availability of housing to rent, either in the private sector or the social housing sector. So, yeah, it's a lot to do. But I think, we've got that voice now. And we're really trying to project it as far as we can and influence.
Yeah, well, I love your hold your nerve statement, because from my perspective, and that's national housing, I would say that we're scaling back new build homes, and that's a worry for me. And that will only gather pace and be a problem in 3-4 years time. So it's going to make the problem worse. But what are some of the other localized things that you're seeing from that coalition or that group of 11, 12 chief executives? What are some of the regional challenges that you're facing other than planning and new build homes? What have been some of the things that you've set out you want to tackle in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, we're just in the process of doing that. I think supply chain is a big one about how can we, getting people to build homes. And the further south you go, the more challenging this becomes. And I'm quite lucky where we are because we can pull on the Bristol, we can go up, Yeah. So actually, how do we create better supply chains and vehicles to deliver? If we can deliver more homes, how are they going to get built? How can we make it attractive for people to want to work in the southwest and build homes? And obviously the way that we construct homes is a really important part of that. So I think we've become very distracted a little bit with the infrastructure levy, and the sort of depressing thing about that is all that's going to do is take us back to where we started, making sure we've got as many homes as we can that are affordable. But the cost of housing, of course, is the region is, I think, is the fourth outside of London, the southeast and the east, we're the most expensive region, and we've got the lowest wage market. So that gap between income and ability to own is huge. There's quite a strong market for shared ownership, certainly in the area that I operate. But with the interest rates going up and everything else, there's a point at which that becomes, unaffordable for people as well in the short term. So I think we're doing that. We've been specifically asking to looking at things like the holiday lets and what we can do around some of the southwest where the housing is not being utilised, and the homes that are being developed are being not the right type of homes. So there are homes being developed, but they're luxury homes that are being sold for rental, for example, not for local people to live in.
Yeah, and it's interesting because whenever I think of the Southwest, and I'm sure everyone makes this generalisation, you think affluent, second home territory, but there must be such a demand, and you've seen the data, I haven't, but there's got to be such a demand for affordable homes. But it's probably not what people think when they think of the West. That's the thing.
Yeah, and I know some of the, I think we have the net migration is compared to anywhere else, we have more people wanting to move to the southwest than any other region. So we have more people in than we lose, if that's the right way of saying it.
Absolutely.
And the GDP is strong. So I think we create a positive GDP in the southwest. So it does give that sense that we're thriving, but it also means that we've got to work harder to get our voice heard about the investment that we need and require to keep these, to keep the Southwest thriving in the way that it needs to. And I think particularly actually across the whole of the Southwest, the housing market is really, really challenging. And if you speak to young people, if I speak to young people in Bristol, private rented sector market is just so expensive.
Oh, I bet.
So hard. To buy is really hard. You can't get a social, I liken getting a social housing tenancy now to winning the Willy Wonka ticket, it's golden, it's really hard to get that as well. So we need to build a lot more homes on all different types of homes.
No, it's a lot going on by the sounds of it. And as we wrap up, just the final thing for me, kind of what are some of the things you're excited about? It sounds like you've got a million things going on and a million things that you're implemented and loads of change, which is all exciting. But what are some of the key things that you're really looking forward to for yourself personally, but I suppose also for Alliance?
Yeah. Well, look, I think, one of the key things of a CEO is to have a lot of optimism, right? So I'm quite an optimistic person. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade, as they say. But I think, we're very, it's an interesting one because I would characterize people in the moment in the sector as they're feeling a little bit worn out. At the same time, my job now is to sort of, rally the troops as much as possible about the vision for the future model. We're very passionate about it. The ask within the business was, can we do the pilots outside of the day-to-day, because we've been doing so much change and it's put so much pressure on. And we've said yes to that because, I think it's really important that we get behind doing it in a way that is going to work for everybody. So we're really, really excited about that, and being able to collaborate. I mean, partnership. We haven't talked much about partnership, but partnership is everything for us at Alliance. One of the things that we realise is that we're not big enough to do everything on our own, and we need to really utilise those. So the partnership we've got with North Somerset Council has really matured over the last sort of 6 years. It's gone from being quite sort of transactional stock transfer to a very strategic. We really sit down and look at what are your aims, what are our aims, and how can we work together. And that has been really positive in the sense of land deals and actually the local authority enabling us to build affordable homes really proactively, which is fantastic. So that's quite exciting, and more of that. To do more of that really, and I think they are as dynamic as you can be really, and that relationship's really flourished. What else am I excited about? I don't know. I think pretty much, it's quite depressing that it's very easy to get swamped by how many homes we need to build. But one of the things that I think I always try and do is spend time in the business and see and remembering how much of a big difference we do make to people's lives, So it's like if you go and see somebody get the keys to a new home and that they're moving into, and how excited and the difference it makes, just makes you feel like actually what you're doing is worthwhile. So it's more of that, I think, just kind of really taking those touch point moments to realise the difference that we do make. And I am quite passionate and excited about where the asset journey is going to go. I think I just love the idea that our ambition for our homes and the condition of our homes is going to get better and better. And I think that's what our customers deserve, and I think that's what our colleagues deserve as well. Because I think one of the things about being proud of the organisation that you work for is about going out and about and seeing stuff that's really good, not seeing stuff that's not very good, or only dealing with significant problems. So that's quite exciting, I think, about how we can make that happen.
And it's a nice way to end, because I think where you started with this was that it's all about the product, and the product is the house. And so if your colleagues are seeing good quality housing that you put into your customers into, that'll give them fulfillment, but also like the customers get a better journey. And I agree with you on the asset statement. I think as a sector, we'll just keep getting better now. We'll have to. We'll keep pushing each other. And there's a little healthy competition amongst housing associations to keep improving, which is good and it's healthy. But honestly, I've loved this conversation, and I think some of the things that you're implementing are just unbelievable, and I can't wait to see how they come through. You're obviously, really ambitious to try and change and challenge the norm, which is lovely to see, and I hope more jump on that. And it's great that there's a lovely close-knit market, it feels like, in the Southwest housing market, that all rally together and support each other in partnership. But
that's all the time. And actually, you use the word ambition, and our first value is ambition. Because that's one of the things that we really wanted to bring into the organisation: ambition for our customers, to do great things and have great things, and ambition for ourselves. So I think it does start with ambition. And I'm, if nothing else, and as much as I'm sure I annoy people some days, I'm always relentlessly banging that drum to people that we can do more with what we've got available. That pride test is really, really important. But you can't ignore the ugly stuff. You've got to look at it head on.
Well, I think we'll get you back on in the future, because I'd love to see how some of this change all manifests in the future. But thank you for taking the time out, and appreciate it.
Really lovely. Great. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, James.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Hip. If you'd like to hear more from us, please be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast platform. We are also running a 30-minute clinic free of charge to any clients that want to recruit in a more inclusive way. For more information, please reach out to us on our website, andersonjames.com.